My grandmother's funeral was meant to be a goodbye, but my family turned it into a VIP event I wasn't invited to. As I watched their limo drive away without me, I clutched the envelope in my purse and knew their celebration was about to end abruptly. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The silence in the house was heavy, a suffocating blanket that seemed to press down on my chest, making every breath a conscious effort. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a library, which I was so used to in my work as an archivist. It was the hollow, echoing silence of absence. Grandma Rose was gone. I was sitting in the wingback chair in the corner of her bedroom, the same chair I had slept in for the last 3 nights, listening to the rattle of her breathing until it finally, gently stopped. My eyes were gritty, burning from a lack of sleep and the dry, hacking sobs that had racked my body an hour ago. Now, I just felt numb. A cold, gray numbness that started in my toes and worked its way up, freezing my heart. I looked at the empty bed. The hospice nurses had just left, taking the medical equipment with them, leaving the room strangely large and unfamiliar. It felt like a stage after the actors had departed, the drama finished, the lights dimmed. The jarring ring of the doorbell shattered the quiet. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a long, insistent press, followed by a sharp rapping. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, smoothing down my wrinkled cardigan. I knew who it was. I had made the calls only 2 hours ago. When I opened the heavy oak front door, I wasn't greeted with a hug or a sympathetic look. I was greeted by a wall of expensive perfume and the clicking of heels on the hardwood. "Finally," Aunt Brenda said, pushing past me without making eye contact. She was wearing a pristine white pantsuit, shocking against the somber mood of the house. She held a venti coffee cup in one hand and her phone in the other. "God, Sadie, you look terrible. Have you even showered?" Behind her, my cousin Tiffany drifted in, her eyes glued to her screen. She was thumbing rapidly, the light of the phone illuminating a face that was perfectly made up, contouring sharp enough to cut glass. "Mom, the lighting in here is awful," Tiffany complained, not acknowledging me. "For the memorial reel, we're going to need ring lights. Lots of them." "We'll handle it," Brenda said, already marching toward the living room, her eyes scanning the antique furniture like she was appraising merchandise at an estate sale. "Sadie, where are the papers? The death certificate? The deed? We need to get the ball rolling immediately. The market is volatile right now." I stood by the open door, the cool autumn air swirling around my ankles. I hadn't even closed it yet. She just died, Aunt Brenda," I whispered, my voice cracking. "She's been gone for 3 hours." Brenda stopped and turned, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance, like I was a slow child who didn't understand how the world worked. "And life goes on, Sadie," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "We have a funeral to plan, a big one. Rose deserves the best send-off money can buy. And frankly, someone needs to take charge because you're clearly falling apart." She turned her back to me again, gesturing for Tiffany to follow her into the dining room. "Come on, Tiff. Let's see if the silver is real or plated. We need to inventory everything before the cleaners come." I stood there, paralyzed. The grief I felt for the woman who had raised me was suddenly being crowded out by something else, a sharp, hot spike of disbelief. They weren't here to mourn. They were here to liquidate. As I watched them, Tiffany laughed at something on her phone, the sound bright and jarring in the morning house. It was in that moment, watching them treat my grandmother's sanctuary like a garage sale, that I realized the betrayal wasn't just happening now. It had been planned for years. The emptiness of the house was suddenly filled with their greed, and the betrayal felt worse than the diagnosis itself. The next 3 days were a blur of motion that I was explicitly excluded from. Aunt Brenda and Tiffany moved into the guest suite, or rather, they took over the guest suite. Their luggage, designer bags bursting with clothes, lined the hallway. The house, usually smelling of lavender and old paper, now smelled of hairspray and takeout food. I was relegated to the background, a ghost in my own home. I tried to help with the arrangements, suggesting the small chapel Grandma loved or the local florist she had been friends with for 40 years. "Oh, honey, no," Brenda said, waving a manicured hand at me from across the kitchen island, which was covered in brochures for high-end event planners. "This isn't a church picnic. We're hiring Lux Farewells. They did the mayor's mother. We need prestige, Sadie." Rose was a woman of stature. "She was a librarian," I said quietly, stirring my tea. "She liked simple things." "She liked nice things," Tiffany corrected, not looking up from her iPad. She was scrolling through casket options. "Mom, look at this one, the royal mahogany. It has gold plating. It matches the vibe for the Instagram aesthetic." "Perfect," Brenda said. "Book it." I wasn't asked about the music. I wasn't asked about the eulogy. When I offered to speak, Brenda gave me a tight, sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sadie, you're too emotional. You'll just cry and make everyone uncomfortable. Tiffany is going to do the reading. She's very poised." The morning of the funeral arrived with a gray, weeping sky. I had dressed in my simple black dress, the one I wore to work events, and pinned Grandma's small pearl brooch to my collar. It was the only thing I had taken from her jewelry box before Brenda had locked it in the safe. I walked out to the driveway, clutching my purse. A sleek, stretched black limousine sat idling in the driveway, looking like a shark in the gray light. It was enormous. Brenda and Tiffany were already outside. Brenda was wearing a black dress that looked more suitable for a cocktail party than a funeral, complete with a fascinator hat with a veil. Tiffany was in a skin-tight black dress with cutouts, holding a bouquet of lilies that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The driver was holding the door open. Brenda slid in, adjusting her skirts. Tiffany followed, checking her reflection in the window before ducking inside. I stepped forward, moving toward the open door. "Wait," Tiffany said, her hand shooting out to block the entrance. She looked at me, then looked at the empty seat next to her, which was piled high with flower arrangements and gift bags. "What?" I asked, confused. "There's no room," Tiffany said, shrugging. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "We have the flowers, the projector for the slideshow, and Mom's extra clothes for the reception. Plus, I need space to film the day in the life intro inside the car." I looked at the cavernous interior. It was a stretch limo. There was room for 10 people. "Tiffany, it's a limo. There is plenty of seats." "Not with the equipment," Brenda called out from the depths of the car. "Sadie, don't make a scene. The driver is on a schedule. Just call an Uber. It's only a 20-minute drive." "You want me to take an Uber to my own grandmother's funeral?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's practical," Brenda snapped. "We need to focus. You're just negative energy right now. We'll see you there. Don't be late." Tiffany grabbed the handle and pulled the heavy door shut. I saw her face through the tinted glass for a split second. She was already smiling at her phone, fixing her hair. The engine purred, and the long black car crunched over the gravel, pulling away. I stood alone in the driveway, the rain starting to drizzle, dampening my hair. I watched them go, the taillights fading into the mist. A normal person might have collapsed. A normal person might have screamed. But as I stood there, feeling the cold rain on my face, I didn't cry. I reached into my purse and touched the leather-bound folder I had retrieved from the safety deposit box 3 months ago. The one Brenda didn't know existed. "Go ahead," I whispered to the empty driveway. "Enjoy the ride." They thought they were the main characters in this story. They thought they were driving off to claim their inheritance. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Grandma Rose wasn't just a sweet old lady. She was a woman who saw everything. And she had taught me to see it too. To understand why the limousine door slamming in my face wasn't just rude, but a declaration of war, you have to understand the last 5 years. 5 years ago, Grandma Rose was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. It started small, forgotten keys, a stove left on, but it accelerated with terrifying speed. At the time, I was 27, working a junior position at the City Museum and living in a small apartment downtown. Brenda and Tiffany were living 3 states away, in a condo Brenda had bought with her second husband's alimony money. When the doctor broke the news that Rose needed full-time care, I called Aunt Brenda immediately. "Put her in a home," Brenda had said over the phone. I could hear the clinking of glasses in the background. She was at a happy hour. "Sell the house to pay for it. I know a great realtor in the area who can flip it fast." "She wants to stay home, Brenda," I had argued. "This house is her life. Grandpa built the gazebo, her garden is here." "Well, I can't come," Brenda replied sharply. "I have my career. Real estate is 24/7, Sadie, and Tiffany is just starting her modeling classes. We can't uproot our lives for babysitting." So I did. I quit my job at the museum and moved into the guest room. I became a freelancer, working late into the night archiving digital files so I could be awake during the day for Rose. For 5 years, I bathed her. I spoon-fed her when her hands shook too much to hold a fork. I played her favorite jazz records when she didn't recognize my face, hoping the music would bring her back, even for a second. I watched a brilliant, vibrant woman slowly fade. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. And in those 5 years, Brenda visited exactly twice. The first time was Christmas, 2 years in. She stayed for 45 minutes, complained that the house smelled like old people, and asked Rose where the silver tea set was kept. When Rose couldn't remember, Brenda got angry and left. The second time was 6 months ago. Tiffany came with her. They didn't come to see Rose. They came because there was a rumor that the city was planning to build a highway nearby and property values might skyrocket. They walked through the house like sharks. Brenda, a luxury real estate specialist, a title she gave herself, spent the entire visit tapping on walls and criticizing the decor. "This wallpaper has to go," she had said, standing in Rose's bedroom while Rose slept just feet away. "We knock down this wall, open up the concept, modernize the kitchen. We could list this for 1.2 million easily, maybe 1.5 if we stage it right." Tiffany, who was 24 and described her profession as lifestyle curator, spent the visit taking selfies in the garden. "Grandma's aesthetic is so vintage cottagecore," she told her livestream followers. "Can't wait to inherit this vibe and update it." I remember standing in the kitchen doorway, holding a tray of medication, shaking with rage. "She's not dead yet," I had hissed at them. "She can hear you." Brenda had rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, she doesn't know what day it is. Be practical, Sadie. You're wasting your life playing nursemaid. When she passes, we sell. That's the plan. You'll get a nice little cut for your trouble, and we can all move on." "A cut?" I asked. "Well, naturally," Brenda smiled, a predator's smile. "I'm the only daughter, you're just the granddaughter, and since your father passed, well, the hierarchy is clear." They saw me as the help. A convenient, unpaid servant who kept the asset, the house, in good condition until they were ready to cash it out. They looked at me with my messy bun, my comfortable shoes, and my dark circles, and they saw a loser. Someone with no ambition. Someone easily rolled over. They didn't know that on the nights when Rose was lucid, we talked. We talked for hours. We talked about the family, about greed, and about legacy. They didn't know about the lawyer who came to the house on a rainy Tuesday 4 months ago, when Brenda was busy posting photos of her mental health retreat in Bali. As I stood in the rain waiting for the Uber, watching the water pool around my shoes, I thought about Brenda's immaculate white pantsuit. I thought about Tiffany's refusal to move a bag of clothes to let me sit down. The Uber app beeped. "Your driver called, is 2 minutes away." I wiped the rain from my phone's screen and looked at the family group chat. Tiffany had just posted a photo from inside the limo. She was holding a champagne flute at 10 a.m. on the way to a funeral with the caption, "R.I.P. Grandma, sad day, family first limo life." I didn't feel the grief anymore. The numbness was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't just going to the funeral to mourn my grandmother. I was going to the funeral to honor her final wish. And her final wish wasn't about flowers or music. It was about teaching a lesson to the people who thought love was a transaction. My Uber pulled up, a modest gray sedan. I got in the back. "Where to?" Called asked. "St. Jude's Cemetery," I said, buckling my seatbelt. "And please take the scenic route. I have some thinking to do." Brenda and Tiffany thought they were driving toward a payday. They had no idea they were driving off a cliff. The Uber ride was quiet, save for the rhythmic swishing of the windshield wipers. Called, sensing my mood, didn't try to make small talk, for which I was grateful. I needed the silence to rehearse. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Aunt Brenda. "Where are you?" "Service starts in 10. Don't embarrass us." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app, not to check my meager savings, but to confirm the deposit I had made 3 days ago, the retainer for Mr. Halloway. When Grandma Rose's health took a sharp turn for the worse 6 months ago, she had moments of profound clarity amidst the fog of dementia. During one of those lucid afternoons, while we sat in the sunroom watching the cardinals at the feeder, she had grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Sadie," she had rasped, her blue eyes piercing through the haze. "They're waiting for me to die, like vultures on a fence post." "Don't say that, Grandma," I had soothed, though I knew it was true. "Don't hush me," she snapped, sounding like her old self. "Brenda, she's got a mortgage on that condo she can't afford. And Tiffany, that girl thinks money grows on Instagram. They think this house is their winning lottery ticket." She had pulled me closer. "Get the box from under the floorboard in the closet, the cedar one." Inside that box wasn't jewelry or cash. It was a single, heavy envelope sealed with wax and a business card for a man named Arthur Halloway-esque. "Call him," she ordered. "Tell him it's time for the red folder protocol." I had never heard of it, but I did as I was told. Mr. Halloway was an estate attorney who specialized in high-asset trusts and complex family litigation. He wasn't the friendly family lawyer who did wills for $500. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you expected a war. Over the next few months, while Brenda was busy posting about her spiritual journey and ignoring my updates on Rose's condition, Mr. Halloway and I had quietly restructured everything. Now, sitting in the back of the Uber, I pulled up the email Mr. Halloway had sent me that morning. Attached was a PDF titled "The Rose Sterling Irrevocable Trust Final Execution Copy." I scrolled to page 4, paragraph 12. The trustee. My finger hovered over the name. Sadie Miller. Not Brenda, not a bank. Me. And then, page 7. Distribution of assets. The house wasn't just a house. It was the primary asset of a trust that also held a significant portfolio of municipal bonds and blue-chip stocks Rose had inherited from her own father and quietly grown over 50 years. Brenda thought Rose was house-rich and cash-poor. She was wrong. Rose was wealthy, very wealthy, but there was a catch. A clause Rose had insisted on, written in her own shaky handwriting before it was formalized. The beneficiary clause, distribution of assets to secondary beneficiaries, Brenda Miller, Tiffany Miller, is contingent upon the trustees' sole discretion regarding their adherence to the family care standard. In plain English, if they didn't treat the family right, they didn't get a dime. And I was the judge. The Uber pulled up to the cemetery gates. I saw the hearse, and behind it, the stretch limo. A small crowd had gathered by the graveside, mostly Brenda's friends, people Rose hadn't seen in years. I paid called and stepped out into the drizzle. I didn't walk toward the family canopy where Brenda and Tiffany were holding court, dabbing at dry eyes with lace handkerchiefs. I walked to the back, standing under an old oak tree, my black umbrella shielding me. I watched as Tiffany set up a tripod near the open grave. She was actually filming. Brenda was speaking to the priest, gesturing wildly at the flower arrangements. No, move the spray to the left. It's blocking the view from the road." I took a deep breath. The sadness of losing Rose hit me again, a wave of grief for the woman who had taught me to read, to bake, to stand up for myself. But as I watched Tiffany check her makeup in the reflection of the coffin's brass handle, the grief hardened into resolve. They had made me take an Uber to my own grandmother's funeral, because there was no room. Well, I was about to show them exactly how much room I took up. The service was a farce. The priest, a man Rose had never met, gave a generic homily about a beloved mother and community pillar. Brenda gave a eulogy that was 80% about her own struggles as a single mother and entrepreneur, and 20% about how much she would miss Mom's guidance. Tiffany read a poem off her phone, stumbling over the words, and ended by asking everyone to like and subscribe to keep Rose's memory alive. I stood silently at the back. When it was time to throw the dirt, Brenda and Tiffany went first, tossing the earth with theatrical flair for the camera. I waited until everyone had gone, then stepped forward. I dropped a single white rose onto the casket. "Goodbye, Grandma," I whispered. "I'll handle the rest." The reception was at the house. Brenda had catered it with high-end hors d'oeuvres that Rose would have hated, tiny, tasteless things on crackers. The house was full of strangers. I walked in through the kitchen door, shaking off my umbrella. Brenda was in the living room, holding a glass of wine, surrounded by a group of women in expensive coats. "Sadie," she called out when she saw me, her voice shrill. "You made it. Grab a plate, darling. We were just discussing the listing. My friend Karen here thinks we can get it on the market by Monday." The room went quiet. Everyone looked at me, the poor cousin who had taken an Uber. "Monday might be rushing it, Aunt Brenda," I said, my voice steady. I walked into the center of the room. "Nonsense," Brenda laughed, a tinkling, fake sound. "The market waits for no one. Besides, Tiffany needs her share for her venture capital project, and I have some investments to attend to." "Venture capital?" I asked, looking at Tiffany, who was eating a shrimp puff. "My brand launch," Tiffany said, rolling her eyes. "I'm starting a line of sustainable athleisure. It's going to be huge. Grandma would have wanted me to follow my dreams." "Grandma wanted you to visit her," I said. The words hung in the air. Brenda's smile faltered. "Excuse me." "She wanted you to visit, once. In 5 years," I said, louder this time, "but you were too busy. And now you're talking about selling her house before she's even cold." Brenda put her glass down on an antique coaster with a sharp clack. "Sadie, you are hysterical, you're grieving, and you're lashing out. I understand. It's hard when you don't have resources. But let the adults handle the business." "The business," I repeated. "You mean the house?" "Yes, the house," Brenda snapped, "and everything in it. Which, by the way, I need you to vacate by Sunday. The stagers are coming Monday morning." "Vacate?" I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat. It wasn't a happy laugh. "Yes, you can stay in the guest room until then, but really you should start packing. You have a lot of clutter." I reached into my bag and pulled out the large manila envelope I had brought from the safety deposit box. "Actually, Aunt Brenda," I said, opening the flap, "I don't think the stagers will be coming on Monday." "And why is that?" Brenda crossed her arms, looking bored. "Because," I said, sliding the document out, "you don't own the house." Tiffany snorted. "What are you talking about? Mom is her only daughter. It goes to next of kin, that's the law." "Not when the property is held in a trust," I said calmly. Brenda froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her rouge standing out like clown makeup. "A trust? Mom didn't have a trust. She didn't even have a lawyer." "She did," I corrected. "She had Mr. Holloway, and she signed this 3 months ago." I placed the document on the coffee table. The words "The Rose Sterling Irrevocable Trust" were visible in bold, black letters. "What is this?" Brenda hissed, snatching it up. Her eyes scanned the pages frantically. This says. "It says the house, the contents, and the investment accounts are all property of the trust," I explained, addressing the room now. "And it names the trustee." "Who is the trustee?" Tiffany asked, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. She lowered her phone. Brenda looked up from the paper, her eyes wide with shock and fury. She looked at me, then back at the paper, then at me again. "It says, Sadie Miller," she whispered. "That's right," I said. "I own the house, Brenda. Technically, the trust owns it, and I control the trust." "This is fake." Brenda shrieked, throwing the papers down. "You forged this." Mom was senile. She couldn't sign anything. "She was deemed competent by 2 independent doctors on the day of signing," I said, pulling out 2 more sheets of paper. "Here are the affidavits, and here is the video recording of the signing, if you'd like to see it." I held up a USB drive. You little snake," Brenda spat, stepping toward me. "You manipulated her. You took advantage of a sick old woman to steal our inheritance." "I didn't steal anything," I said, my voice rising. I was the one who was here. I was the one who changed her sheets. I was the one who held her hand when she was scared. You were in Bali. You were at brunch. You didn't care about her until she became a dollar sign. The room was deadly silent. The guests were exchanging uncomfortable glances. Some were inching toward the door. "Get out," Brenda screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the door. "Get out of my mother's house." "No, Brenda," I said, standing my ground. I felt a surge of power I had never felt before. "This isn't your mother's house anymore. It's mine, and I'm not the one who has to leave." The next hour was chaos. Brenda tried to physically throw me out, but her friends held her back. She called the police, claiming I was a trespasser. When the officers arrived, two polite deputies I knew because they had helped me find Grandma when she wandered off last year, they looked at the trust documents, looked at Brenda, and shrugged. "It looks legal to us, ma'am," the older deputy said. "This is a civil matter. We can't remove a legal resident and trustee from the property." Brenda was apoplectic. She stormed out to the driveway, screaming into her phone to her own lawyer. Tiffany, meanwhile, had gone live on TikTok. "You guys won't believe this," she was whispering into her phone in the foyer. "My cousin just scammed us out of everything. She's literally a squatter. We're going to sue her into the ground. Family drama scammer alert." They left eventually, but not before Brenda vowed to destroy me. "I'll have that trust overturned by Friday." She yelled from the window of the limo, the same limo that still had no room for me. "You'll be in jail for elder abuse." The following week was a siege. Brenda hired a high-profile lawyer, a man named Sterling Wolfe who was known for being a bulldog. They filed an emergency injunction to freeze the assets. They petitioned the court to have me removed as trustee on grounds of undue influence. I received a cease and desist letter regarding the theft of family heirlooms. Tiffany started a smear campaign online, posting edited videos where I looked unhinged, claiming I had isolated Grandma Rose to brainwash her. It was terrifying. I was just an archivist. I didn't know how to fight a legal battle, but Mr. Holloway was a rock. "Let them scream," he told me over tea in Grandma's kitchen. "They're making mistakes. Every text Brenda sends you, every video Tiffany posts, it's evidence." And the evidence was mounting. Mr. Holloway hired a forensic accountant to look into Brenda's finances, suspecting that her desperation for the sale came from more than just greed. What he found was staggering. Brenda was broke. Not just cash poor, she was millions in debt. She had leveraged her condo, maxed out credit cards, and taken out predatory loans to fund her luxury lifestyle. She needed the sale of Grandma's house to avoid bankruptcy and potential fraud charges for a failed real estate scheme. But the biggest bombshell came from an unexpected source. 2 days before the court hearing, I received a DM on Instagram from a user named Real Estate Truth. "Hey," the message read, "I saw your cousin's video. I used to work for your Aunt Brenda. You need to see this." Attached was a series of emails. Brenda's work emails. They were dated 6 months ago, right around the time she visited Grandma. Email to Quick Flip Properties LLC. Subject: 450 Oak Street, impending sale. My mother is on her last legs. She has dementia, totally out of it. I have power of attorney, working on finalizing it. She's pliable. As soon as she kicks the bucket, we list. I can guarantee a sale price of $800K for a quick cash close. I need the liquidity ASAP to cover the incident with the client funds. She didn't have power of attorney. I did. She had lied to investors, promising them a property she didn't own to cover up money she had stolen from other clients. I read the email again, my hands shaking. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was criminal fraud. I forwarded the emails to Mr. Holloway. 10 minutes later, he called me. "Sadie," he said, his voice grim but satisfied. "This is the nail in the coffin. Not only does this prove she had no intention of honoring your grandmother's wishes, but it also proves premeditated fraud. And the best part." "What?" I asked. "She admits in writing that Rose was totally out of it 6 months ago, but our medical affidavits from 3 months ago, when she signed the trust, show she was lucid." Brenda's own lies about Rose's condition contradict her claim that Rose was too sick to sign the trust later. If she was pliable then, why didn't Brenda get the signature? Because Rose wasn't pliable. Brenda just assumed she would be. So we have her. We have her, Holloway said, but we're not just going to win in court. We're going to end this. The court date was set for Monday. But Brenda, arrogant as ever, had demanded a family mediation first, thinking she could bully me into a settlement. She wanted to meet at the house on Sunday. Let her come, I told Holloway. I want to see her face when she realizes she lost. Sunday arrived with a sky the color of bruised plums. The air was thick and humid, threatening a storm that perfectly matched the mood inside Grandma Rose's house. I sat at the head of the dining room table, Grandma's seat, flanked by Mr. Holloway and his associate, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica. The doorbell rang at exactly 2:00 p.m. I didn't get up. Jessica went to answer it. Aunt Brenda swept in, bringing a gust of expensive perfume and nervous energy with her. She was dressed for battle in a charcoal power suit, her hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection. Tiffany trailed behind her, looking bored but tense, her phone in hand but remarkably silent. Following them was a man I assumed was Sterling Wolfe, Brenda's lawyer. He looked tired. Well, Brenda announced, dropping her oversized handbag onto the polished mahogany table without asking. Let's get this over with. I assume you're ready to be reasonable, Sadie. Mr. Holloway gestured to the empty chairs on the opposite side. Please, sit. Brenda remained standing, her eyes flicking around the room as if she were already mentally rearranging the furniture. I don't need to sit. We have a simple proposal. We can test the validity of this. Trust. She spat the word like it was poison. We are prepared to drag this through probate for years. We will freeze every asset. You won't see a dime for legal fees. Or, she paused for dramatic effect. We settle. We sell the house, split the proceeds 40-40-20. You get 20%, of course. Generous, considering you're not a direct heir. And the contents? I asked quietly, my hands folded on the table. Sold at auction, Brenda said dismissively. Tiffany has a contact. We can clear this place out in a week. Mr. Wolfe cleared his throat. Ms. Miller, my client is offering a very fair settlement to avoid litigation, given the questionable circumstances of the trust's creation. Questionable? Mr. Holloway interrupted, his voice calm but steely. Mr. Wolfe, have you reviewed the medical affidavits? The video recording of the signing, the notary's sworn statement. Wolfe shifted uncomfortable. We have concerns about undue influence. Mrs. Sterling was vulnerable. Vulnerable to whom? I asked, finally looking Brenda in the eye. To the granddaughter who lived with her for 5 years, or to the daughter who was emailing investors about selling her mother's home before she was even dead. Brenda froze, her face went slack. What? I slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of the email from Real Estate Truth. Brenda picked it up. As she read, her face drained of color, turning a sickly gray. Her hands began to tremble. Where did you get this? She whispered. From a former employee of yours, I said. It seems not everyone appreciates your business practices, Aunt Brenda. Especially when you use client funds for personal debts. Mr. Wolfe leaned over to read the paper. His eyes widened. He looked at Brenda, then back at the paper. He slowly closed his briefcase. Brenda, Wolfe said, his voice low and dangerous. Is this authentic? It's out of context. Brenda stammered, crumbling the paper. It was a hypothetical, a projection. A projection involving a property you didn't own and funds you weren't authorized to touch. Holloway asked, raising an eyebrow. Because that sounds like fraud, Ms. Miller. And if this email is admitted into evidence in probate court, which is public record, it might trigger an investigation by the Real Estate Commission. And possibly the district attorney. Tiffany looked up from her phone, her eyes wide. Mom, what is he talking about? What funds? Shut up, Tiffany. Brenda snapped, her composure shattering. She turned back to me, her eyes wild. You wouldn't ruin your own family. You ruined this family the moment you drove away in that limo. I said, standing up. You left me on the curb at my grandmother's funeral because there was no room. You treated her life like an inconvenience and her death like a payday. You don't get to talk about family. I picked up the trust document. The trust stands, Brenda. It's ironclad, and under the Family Care Standard Clause, I have made a decision. I looked at Tiffany, then at Brenda. The trust will not be distributing any cash assets to secondary beneficiaries at this time, I declared. The house will not be sold. It will remain in the family as a residence for myself and a potential future museum archive. And as for the investment portfolio, Brenda looked hopeful for a split second. It will be placed in a charitable remainder trust. The income will go to dementia research and elder care advocacy. You will receive nothing. Nothing, Brenda screeched. You can't do that. I have debts. I have investors. That sounds like a you problem, I said coldly. Maybe you should have made room in the limo. Brenda lunged across the table, her hand clawing for the papers. Mr. Wolf caught her arm, restraining her. Enough, Brenda, he barked. It's over. If this goes to court with that email, you're going to prison. We are leaving. Brenda sagged in his grip, sobbing. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was the wail of a child who had been told no for the first time. Tiffany stared at her mother in horror, then looked at me. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, the realization that the money tap was turned off forever. Sadie, Tiffany started, her voice trembling. I didn't mean. Goodbye, Tiffany, I said. Please see yourselves out, or I can call the deputies again. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Brenda. Mr. Wolf dropped her as a client the next day. The investors she had lied to filed a class action lawsuit within the month. She was forced to sell her condo and declare bankruptcy. Last I heard, she was living in a small apartment 2 towns over, working as a receptionist at a dental office. Tiffany's brand collapsed when she couldn't fund the launch. She moved in with a friend and, surprisingly, got a job at a coffee shop. I saw a post from her recently, no filters, just a picture of her latte art. She looked tired but real. As for me, I stayed in the house. I spent months cataloging Grandma's extensive collection of books and letters. The Rose Sterling Archive is now a small, private library open to researchers by appointment. I hired an assistant, a young history student named Leo, who reminds me of myself 5 years ago. The silence in the house isn't heavy anymore. It's peaceful. One rainy afternoon, 6 months after the funeral, I was sitting on the porch, watching the rain fall on the garden I had restored. The hydrangeas were blooming, heavy blue heads bowing in the wet. A car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a limo, it was a beat-up sedan. Tiffany got out. She walked up the path slowly, no phone in sight. She stopped at the bottom of the steps. She looked different, less makeup, hair in a simple ponytail. Hi, she said, her voice small. Hi, I replied, not moving from my rocker. I brought these, she said, holding out a small, potted violet. Grandma liked them. She placed the pot on the bottom step. I'm sorry, Sadie, she said, looking down at her shoes. About everything. The limo, the funeral, we were awful. I looked at her. I saw the girl she used to be before Brenda's ambitions swallowed her whole. Why are you here, Tiffany? I asked gently. Mom is impossible, she admitted, a wry smile touching her lips. I just wanted to see the house, to see if you were okay. I'm okay, I said. We stood there for a long moment, the rain drumming on the porch roof. Can I see the garden? She asked hesitantly. I thought about the family care standard. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about behavior, it was about change. The back gate is open, I said. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you. She walked around the side of the house. I watched her go, then picked up my tea. Grandma Rose was right. The house wasn't a lottery ticket, it was a home. And finally, after all the noise and the fighting, it felt like one again. I took a sip of tea, listening to the rain, and smiled. I didn't need a limo. I was exactly where I was supposed to be.